Welcome to WHRO's Weekly Edition. I'm Doug Boynton. In this week's program, the president of Newport News Shipbuilding, Jennifer Boykin, may not have had plans to go to Moscow, but in the latest, she's now barred from entering the country. Rising water levels and other climate change factors threaten the local barrier islands. Katherine Hafner travels to Hog Island with researchers working to study the situation.
In the natural setting, we have a unique opportunity in Virginia to examine how the islands change over time.
And the Virginia Center for Investigative Journalism at WHRO continues its Democracy at Work series. The union representing Williamsburg-James City County Public Schools staff wants a collective bargaining process. We get details from WHRO's Nick McNamara.
Williamsburg-James City Education Association President Marco Sardi says collective bargaining would allow staff a chance to work with administration on lingering issues, including guaranteed planning time for teachers and maximum work hours.
It's a way to share power, and it's a way to make it a truly collaborative discussion.
It could be a tough sell, with multiple board members in early September expressing concern about the request's timing, with the question of the division's potential separation still unanswered. The union submitted an affidavit to the school board in late May requesting a vote to establish a committee that would craft a resolution permitting collective bargaining. That resolution would set the ground rules for what could be discussed during bargaining. A vote on creating a committee is expected to take place September 17th. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
And we should mention that Williamsburg-James City County Public Schools are stakeholders in Heretta, which holds the license to the WHRO stations. Not that she was planning to go, but the Russians now say "niet" to the president of Newport News Shipbuilding. She's now banned from traveling to Russia as part of that country's latest wave of personal sanctions against U.S. citizens. The details from WHRO's Ryan Murphy.
Jennifer Boykin, who leads Newport News Shipbuilding for Huntington Ingalls, was listed among 92 Americans who will be prevented from entering Russia indefinitely. The group includes journalists, government officials, and the heads of several American defense companies. Todd Boykin, another Huntington Ingalls executive, was also named in this latest round. HII directed questions about the list to the U.S. Department of State. At its shipyard in Newport News, the company builds and provides maintenance for U.S. Navy aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and more. Russia's foreign ministry says the sanctions are in response to what it calls the Russophobic policy of the Biden administration. Nations around the globe leveled heavy sanctions against Russia following its 2022 invasion of Ukraine. Ryan Murphy, WHRO News.
Virginia's barrier islands help protect the eastern shore by bearing the brunt of storms, but those islands are at risk from rising sea levels and other impacts of climate change. WHRO's Katherine Hafner traveled to Hog Island off the eastern shore with researchers who are working to learn more.
It's not easy to get to Hog Island. It's a narrow stretch of land east of Exmoor that straddles a seaside bay and the Atlantic Ocean. You need permission from managers of the nature preserve and a boat to navigate there. What makes it even more complicated is that the shape of the island is constantly changing. That's exactly why Julie Zinnert is there.
In the natural setting, we have a unique opportunity in Virginia to examine how the islands change over time.
Zinnert is a biology professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. Her team is researching how Hog Island responds to changing climate conditions. She says the island's outline kind of looks like a chicken drumstick, rotating over time.
Historically, in the last century, the northern island was the meaty part, and now the northern end is eroding and becoming narrower, and the southern end is growing out and becoming that meaty part.
She's especially interested in sand dunes and the grasses that grow on them. Dune grasses trap in sediment and grow the mounds. Knowing more about that process helps inform things like how to fight erosion. So recently, Zinnert and her team set out to gather data in the field. They pull on waders and trudge through the muck of high tide to get to dunes on the southern tip of the island. Grasses grow all over these dunes, but only some are part of the VCU experiment. Zinnert's group planted several plots a few months earlier. Now it's time to collect samples and see how they've grown.
You want to kind of dig around just to preserve as much of the root as you can, and then dig down under.
Anne Scialino is a graduate student focused on coastal plant ecology. She says humans often use these plants to protect shorelines, but
a lot of times when they plant the dune grasses, the plantings are not very successful. A lot of times they die. So the goal of this project is to find the best planting design to help the plants survive better, which saves money.
Saves money and potentially saves houses or communities. Meanwhile, recent graduate Alex Sabo and a colleague measure land elevation. They're focused on spots with lots of dune grass. They'll pair that data with the information Scialino gathers about the actual growth of the plants. Sabo says they want to make sure computer models and other work back at the campus lab in Richmond is accurate on the ground.
We want to be able to field verify some wind tunnel experiments that have helped us kind of get an idea of how the dunes are developing.
These islands have been here for thousands of years. Zinnert says they were likely further seaward originally. The land acts as a buffer when a hurricane or nor'easter blows through, absorbing some of the most intense winds and waves before they reach the mainland.
So by having these, they can prevent storm damage from being quite as extreme.
Hog Island was once home to a couple hundred people in a town called Broadwater, until a series of hurricanes drove off the last residents in the 1930s. No one lives here anymore, but Zinnert says the goal is to apply what they learn to other barrier islands where people do live, like the Outer Banks.
How much can you invest in the system to maintain it versus it turning into like Rodanthe, where it's no longer feasible to try to maintain that because it's too costly.
First, they have to collect the data before the island changes again. Katherine Hafner, WHRO News.
Still ahead on Weekly Edition, the Army is getting crafty with its admission policies. Potential recruits now have the opportunity to earn their GED after enlistment. But first, Calvin Pearson founded and was the president of Hampton-based Project 1619 Incorporated. He died on Labor Day. WHRO's Nick McNamara has a remembrance.
Friends and colleagues describe Calvin Pearson as motivated, determined, even visionary. He helped create Project 1619, a nonprofit created to correct the narrative about the first Africans taken to Virginia and their point of landing at what's now Fort Monroe.
Brother Calvin Pearson, he made it a very important part of his life, as all of us did. He worked very hard on the vineyard. All of us together brought Project 1619 to where it is right now.
That's co-founding Project 1619 member Bill Wiggins. Pearson, Wiggins, and others corrected misinformation about African American history on historical markers and led the effort to see an African landing memorial installed at Fort Monroe. A homegoing service is planned for Pearson at First Baptist Church of Hampton at 11 a.m. on September 10th. Nick McNamara, WHRO News.
One way the Army is trying to boost recruitment is by targeting people who want to enlist but never finished high school. A new program will allow them to join the Army, then get their GEDs. From San Antonio, Gabriela Alcorta Solario reports for the American Homefront Project.
Devin Richard is going back to school after a long time out of the classroom. Richard is 32. When he was a teenager, he dropped out of high school, where he admits he was not very interested in learning.
My mom pulled me out, well, my godmother, because I started fights, stopped a kid with a fork, pretty much a troublemaker, catching almost a house on fire.
For 15 years, Richard bounced around from place to place, job to job, never getting ahead.
A buddy of mine that's stationed here in San Antonio, he was like, why don't you join the military?
But the military generally won't accept people like Richard who lack high school diplomas, and it isn't always easy for potential recruits to go back to school on their own. That's why Richard was happy to find the Future Soldier program at Palo Alto College in San Antonio, a new college GED program in partnership with the Army. He signed up in July.
Pretty much make better of myself and have better stuff for my daughters when she gets older.
So far, 8 people have signed up for the program, which allows them to earn a GED for free and then automatically enter the Army. Taylor Coffey, who coordinates the program at Palo Alto, says Army recruiters in the past often told potential recruits to go get GEDs, but few actually did it.
I feel we just need to do better. We need to have a better process to where a recruiter, instead of just handing them information saying, like, here's what we think you do, come back and see us, why don't we have a streamlined process to where we can help future soldiers get their GED and enlist at the same time.
The program is one of several the Army has recently created nationally to help recruitment. Another, a pre-boot camp, is designed for recruits who need extra academic or physical training. Meanwhile, the Army has reformed its national and local recruiting operations. Captain Ilenia Isaguirre is the commander of San Antonio West Recruiting Company. She says times have changed, and so have the recruits.
People have way more options now in this 21st century than they did before. And so we're really trying to compete with that, right? And we offer them bonuses, educational opportunities, things of that nature. And slowly the gap is starting to come a little close, more knit between, the private sector and us as the military.
A new marketing effort is also part of the Army's reformed recruiting efforts. Isaguirre says that can help high schoolers and others better appreciate what the military offers.
What do we really do in the military? We're not just, in the front lines where, hey, I could get you a cyber accreditation, right? I mean, where are your other friends working somewhere in the community with no prospects, right? So that's where we really want to hopefully bridge that gap.
I'd like to thank each and every one of you all for being with us today, particularly...
The Future Soldier program welcomed its inaugural class with a ceremony on the Palo Alto campus, led by Robert Garza, the school's president, who says he hopes the program will mark a new level of cooperation between the military and local colleges.
My hope and expectation for recruitment team for the Army is put them in your car and drive them over here to Palo Alto. We'll take care of them, navigate them, make sure that they get their GED, and then they have those opportunities for their future.
Students in the program are going through an 8-week program for their GED, learning not just the academics they need for the GED, but also military readiness. Richard, the 32-year-old student, is looking forward to finishing and starting his military service.
I'm going to go in the Army. I want to see what it's like in the Army. And if I don't like it, I'll go in the Air Force.
Garza, the college president, says he hopes to expand this program, not just to his sister schools in Texas, but across the country, so those who want to serve have the chance. I'm Gabriela Alcorta Solorio in San Antonio.
This is WHRO's Weekly Edition. Remember, for any stories you've missed, you can visit us on the WHRO smartphone app or all social media platforms.
Uncertainty in the Tar Heel State. The North Carolina State Board of Elections is not sure when it will start sending out requested absentee ballots. As WUNC's Rusty Jacobs reports, the board has to reprint the ballots without Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s name on them, a process that could take up to 2 weeks.
Kennedy sought removal after suspending his campaign for president and endorsing GOP nominee Donald Trump. The Elections Board's Democratic majority refused, with printed ballots set to go out last Friday as mandated by state law. The board was overruled on appeal, a reversal now affirmed by the state's high court. 4 of the high court's conservative justices said the state constitution's free elections clause guaranteed voters accurate information about candidates, which includes removing Kennedy's name. The court's 2 Democratic justices dissented, as did Republican Justice Richard Dietz. He said the court must follow the law, which allowed the board to deny Kennedy's request so late in the process. I'm Rusty Jacobs.
The office of Lieutenant Governor in North Carolina doesn't come with much power, but it is often a stepping stone for leaders who eventually run for governor. This year's election for the job features a state senator whose father held the position 50 years ago, and a veteran political staffer who worked inside the office. More on that from WUNC's Colin Campbell.
With current Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson running for governor, Democrat Rachel Hunt and Republican Hal Weatherman are seeking to replace him. The 2 candidates have sharp contrast in their views on abortion, education policy, and elections oversight. Hunt is a Charlotte attorney who served in the legislature since 2019, and her father is former governor and Lieutenant Governor Jim Hunt. She sponsored legislation to loosen abortion restrictions.
I was the primary sponsor of the Codify Roe v. Wade bill in the Senate, and that's exactly what I think we should go back to. The freedoms women had for reproductive health care rights here in this country for 50 years.
Weatherman, who is a top aide to former Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest, wants additional abortion restrictions beyond the 12-week ban passed by the GOP legislature last year.
I would like to see a 6-week, what I consider, what most people call a heartbeat ban, only because I think we as a culture, most people will accept that the death of a life, happens when the heart stops beating.
The lieutenant governor presides over state senate sessions, but only casts a vote if there's a tie, so it's unlikely the winner of this year's campaign will determine future abortion policy. The lieutenant governor has a more active role on education, serving on the State Board of Education and the Community College Board. Weatherman says he wants the state to expand apprenticeship programs and ban subjects like diversity, equity, and inclusion from the classroom.
I want to get those out of the classroom and go back to the basics. I want to teach cursive. I want our kids to know cursive, and I want people to know why. It's not just a feel-good thing. I want our kids, our future generations, to be able to read the founding documents of our nation in its original script without having to be dependent on somebody who may or may not, like a teacher, who may or may not agree with those principles.
Hunt's campaign focuses more on increasing education funding and teacher pay. She's critical of the legislature's actions on education, such as requiring lesson plans to be posted online.
Our teachers are professionals. They need to be treated that way and paid that way. And right now they are being treated very badly, which is why we have a 10,000 number teacher shortage in the state.
Election oversight is another issue that has come up in the race. Weatherman leads a nonprofit group called the Electoral Education Foundation, which collects data on voter registrations and ballots.
If someone feels that they need to contest an election, they need to have immediate access to actionable data that may or may not prove a case for fraud or for, that their race was upside down, didn't go the way they wanted.
Weatherman wants to create an oversight function in the lieutenant governor's office to monitor the state board of elections, but Hunt says that's a bad idea.
We have the safest system here in North Carolina of any state in the country. We do not need the lieutenant governor's office injecting itself into the state board of elections. They know what they are doing.
Since the office doesn't have much power to set policy, each candidate has their own strategy for how to promote their agenda. Weatherman says he'll work with the legislature like he did when Dan Forest was in the job.
I'm going to continue that process, what we did in Dan's office. And when there's something I want to advocate, draft my own bill and find a member to introduce it for me and help champion it.
Hunt is likely to face a Republican legislature if she's elected.
I would travel around like I've been doing for over a year and a half now and listen to people in every area of North Carolina about what their needs are.
Both candidates aren't ruling out a run for governor at some point in the future. I'm Colin Campbell.
A free press is essential for democracy. It provides necessary checks and balances on government and holds the powerful accountable. According to the nonprofit Poynter Institute, nearly 3,000 newspapers have closed across the country since 2004, and more than 43,000 journalists have lost their jobs. And yet, local journalism has never been more important. In the second of our multi-part series, Democracy at Work, we'll hear from Ann Adams. She owns and publishes The Recorder, a 147-year-old weekly newspaper serving citizens in Highland, Bath, and Allegheny counties in Virginia. She's bucking the trends and bringing her readers vital news on their community.
A newspaper of record is not just for legal purposes. It's really the first draft of history. Once you realize how critical that is, then it just motivates you. It's like, I want to help my community.
No, you're the reporter. Yep. Okay, I got to get everybody.
No, I didn't know her, but this newspaper's followed the story.
My name is Ann Adams. I'm 56, and I'm the owner and publisher of The Recorder, a weekly newspaper serving Highland, Bath, and Allegheny counties.
I was an art major, but my mother bought a farm here, and the minute I graduated from college, she's like, come up and renovate it for me. I was living up on the side of this mountain. It was just stunning. And I was like, I don't think I want to go on to the city, which was my original plan. But I needed a job. The paper at that time was owned by a man named Lee Campbell, and he was looking for a part-time sales rep. I was only 21, maybe. He trained me in ad sales. Eventually worked my way up into typesetting, and he had me writing features pretty quickly. So during that time, I learned every aspect of the business, all of it.
A recent report from the Poynter Institute found 130 newspapers closed over the course of 2023, and that since 2005, the U.S. has lost nearly 2,900 newspapers and 43,000 journalist jobs.
Highland is the least populated county in Virginia, by far. It's also got the lowest income level. And what I just learned early on was the newspaper in a place this small can have a very positive effect. I have seen communities who've lost their paper. I'll be damned if that's going to happen here, if I can help it, because we've met up against some stuff that could have changed the environment, the quality of life forever, like no going back. One of the things you can't stand about social media is that you're getting so many different points of view, so much information that's just plain old wrong. If the recorder wasn't here, that's what they'd be left with. When they read the paper, then they are armed with all of the government information, all of the decisions that are being made, what's happening in the school system, and it sort of creates a unified source of here's what we can trust is true. If you don't have a free press, if you don't have journalists, good, experienced journalists willing to do a lot of work, spend a lot of time making sure that the right information is published where everybody can see it, then you're going to end up with an ignorant population. Because folks wouldn't do that kind of work on their own, would they? We all have a stake in how our government, our lives are guided and governed. Everybody's got a voice. Everybody's got the power to do something. And if they don't, then one of the great things about journalism is, as they say, giving voice to those people who are voiceless. We can help. We can help do that. We can help educate them. We can help get them answers. You have this experience of, hey, I can make a difference. Really make a difference. I mean, that's meaningful work. It's hard, and no, you don't make money, but it's meaningful work. I mean, I can look back on 35 years and go, I did something good. I did something right for people.
For VCIJ at WHRO, this is Christopher Tyree.
You've been listening to WHRO's Weekly Edition. We had help today from Katherine Hafner, Barry Graham, Steve Walsh, Ryan Murphy, and Nick McNamara. Rusty Jacobs and Colin Campbell with WUNC, Gabriela Alcorta Solorio for the American Homefront Project, and thanks as always to Connor Worley, who produced today's broadcast. A reminder, you can always catch full episodes on the Weekly Edition podcast feed, and you can get news updates at WHRO.org, the WHRO Reports podcast feed, and 24 hours on the WHRO smartphone app. For all of us at WHRO and WHRV, I'm Doug Boynton. Stay safe. Be well.